Welcome back to World Coins Explorer. The story of the 1980 Canada 5 cents coin begins long before its actual minting, and to understand its true history, we must go back to the early foundations of Canadian coinage, when the country was defining its national symbols and economic identity. Canada's 5 cent coin has always held a special place in the nation's history because it represents not just value, but culture, wildlife, and national pride. The iconic beaver design, which we still see on this 1980 coin, actually dates back to 1937 when artist G.E. Kruger created this powerful image to symbolize the hard-working spirit of Canada. But by the time 1980 arrived, the country was going through rapid economic and political changes, including inflation, industrial shifts, and increased global trade. This coin was struck in the middle of all that change, yet it maintained the same classic design Canadians had trusted for decades. What most people don't know is that the 1980 issue marked a subtle but important era for the 5 cent coin. The mint was experimenting with production levels, metal compositions, and long-term durability because Canada was preparing for even bigger changes in the 1980s. And one question still fascinates collectors today: why did Canada keep the same beaver design for so many years? And what hidden stories are preserved in a 1980 nickel that millions of people used every day without ever thinking about its deeper meaning? When you look at the front of the 1980 coin, the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II seems simple at first, but the real history behind it is full of surprising details. This portrait is known as the second portrait, created by Arnold Machin, an artist whose work appears on billions of coins around the world. His design shows a young queen wearing the tiara gifted to her by Queen Mary, and what makes this particular portrait special is the era it represents: a Canada still deeply connected to its traditions under a young monarch. In 1980, Canada was preparing for economic transformations, yet the image of the Queen on this coin remained unchanged, giving Canadians a sense of continuity and stability. Interestingly, the obverse design on the 1980 nickel carries tiny stylistic changes unique to that period: slight font differences, spacing variations, and the distinct rim style. Many collectors overlook these, but experts know they help identify small varieties that can make certain pieces more desirable. Another intriguing detail is the coin's motto DG Regina, meaning by the grace of God, Queen, a phrase that has sparked discussions for decades about Canada's evolving identity. And during 1980, the Royal Canadian Mint was refining its striking techniques, meaning the sharpness of the Queen's portrait varies slightly from batch to batch, a detail that adds mystery to which pieces may be more valuable today. Turning the coin over reveals the iconic beaver, but even this familiar design hides a surprisingly deep story that most people have never heard. The beaver became a national symbol not because of its cuteness, but because of its massive role in Canada's early economy, especially during the fur trade era of the 1600s and 1700s, when beaver pelts were literally used as currency. When the 1980 5 cent coin was minted, the beaver was not just a symbol, it represented centuries of Canadian economic history. The beaver on the coin sits on a rock, and this specific scene was carefully chosen to represent resilience, nature, and the hardworking Canadian identity. What adds even more depth is the tiny initials KG near the beaver, the hidden signature of designer Kruger, included on every beaver nickel since 1937. The 1980 mintage retained this classic design during a time when many countries were drastically changing their coins, making Canada's choice a powerful statement of national pride. And although millions were produced, 1980 coins can show fascinating differences in strike details, metal toning, and rim alignment, differences that collectors now look for with great excitement. The more you explore the beaver design, the more you realize this coin is not just metal, it's a visual time capsule. The metal composition of the 1980 Canada 5 cents coin might seem like a technical detail, but hidden inside it is a story of economics, global metal shortages, and government decisions that shaped Canada's minting future. The coin is made of pure nickel, something many countries had abandoned by that time due to cost and scarcity. But Canada continued to use nickel because the country had one of the world's richest nickel supplies. By 1980, the Royal Canadian Mint was facing rising metal prices, fluctuating international markets, and pressure to reduce production costs. This coin represents the moment right before Canada started seriously considering cheaper metal alternatives. What most collectors don't realize is that the nickel used in the 1980 5 cent coin came largely from Canadian mines in Sudbury, a region famous for supplying metal to the world. Each coin literally contains a piece of Canada's land and resources. And because nickel is a hard metal, the 1980 coins often show sharp details that have survived decades without losing their shape. This durability is one of the reasons so many 1980 examples still look surprisingly fresh today. But it also raises a fascinating question. How many of these coins were struck so perfectly that they could one day become rare high-grade collectibles? When examining the 1980 Canada 5 cents, collectors around the world pay special attention to its mintage numbers, and this is where the story becomes more intriguing. In 1980, over 206 million 5-cent coins were produced, a huge number which means most people assume these coins are common. But the truth is much more nuanced. High-grade examples, especially those with full mint luster and no circulation marks, are surprisingly difficult to find today. Most coins from 1980 entered circulation immediately and were used heavily for decades, slowly losing their details through wear. That's why collectors who find an original, sharp, untouched example often describe it as a time machine piece. Furthermore, during this period, the Royal Canadian Mint was transitioning between old and modern minting technologies, which introduced minor inconsistencies, small variations that specialists now study closely. Some coins show slightly sharper beaver fur lines, some have stronger rim beads, while others show faint die clashes or tiny alignment shifts. These microscopic details create suspense for collectors, which 1980 nickel in your hand might quietly be one of the rare exceptional pieces. Another fascinating aspect of the 1980 coin is its connection to world events happening at the time. Canada in 1980 was undergoing economic stress, facing inflation, rising metal costs, and political changes, including discussions about national identity and constitutional reforms. It was a period when every part of the economy mattered, even the production of small coins like the 5-cent piece. The Royal Canadian Mint had to balance budget concerns while keeping the public supplied with durable, reliable currency. Meanwhile, global nickel prices were unstable, and many experts believed Canada would soon change the metal composition of the 5-cent coin. This makes the 1980 issue historically important because it represents the final stretch of Canada's pure nickel era, before major changes arrived later in the decade. Collectors today often look at the 1980 coin as the calm before the storm, a moment frozen right before Canada entered a new phase of its minting history. And that sense of transition adds depth and suspense to this otherwise simple coin. The 1980 Canada 5 cents coin also carries emotional and cultural value, especially for Canadians who grew up during that era. For many, this coin brings memories of buying candy, taking buses, saving coins in jars, and everyday life moments that defined childhood in the 1980s. Every scratch, tone, and wear mark on a circulated coin tells a story of human hands, pockets, vending machines, and cash registers it passed through. A perfectly preserved coin, on the other hand, feels almost magical, like it escaped time itself. This emotional connection is why collectors from around the world seek out older Canadian nickels. The beaver design reminds people of Canada's wilderness, its hardworking culture, and its history rooted in nature and trade. Even viewers who aren't collectors get pulled into the story because a simple coin becomes a symbol of identity, nostalgia, and national pride. And when a coin carries both emotional value and historical significance, it becomes more than currency. It becomes a piece of living history. Finally, the mystery that truly surrounds the 1980 Canada 5 cents coin is the question of future value. While most people see it as a common coin, collectors know the truth is more complex. High-grade, uncirculated examples, especially those graded by major coin agencies, can sell for surprisingly high amounts. Rare varieties, strong strikes, and perfectly preserved examples have shocked collectors with their auction results. And the biggest suspense lies in the future. As time passes, more circulated 1980 coins are being lost, damaged, or melted, which means the surviving high-quality pieces will become naturally rarer. It's entirely possible that the coin you hold today, if it has strong luster, sharp strike, and minimal wear, could be worth far more in the coming years than anyone expects. The beauty of coin collecting is that you never know which ordinary-looking coin could suddenly turn into a valuable treasure. And that suspense, that possibility, is exactly why the story of the 1980 Canada 5 cents nickel continues to fascinate collectors across the world.